This is the August 2025 edition of Breaking the Line, the ECNL Podcast. This discussion led by Christian Lavers, the President and CEO of the ECNL. Christian will visit with the recently named Pre-ECNL Commissioners Ruairi McGuinness and Bobby Reiss. I'll leave deeper introductions to both Ruairi and Bobby to Christian Lavers and hand over the microphone to Christian right now.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Dean. And here we are with a couple of new guys here. Mr. Bracken is not with us on this podcast because he is out on vacation, which is a skill that Doug Bracken has, is scheduling periodic vacations to get away. He does a good job at that, which is said honestly and jealously at the same time. And we got two guys here that are first-time podcast appearances. We're going to make sure that they listen to the podcast moving forward because I think it's part of the job now, unfortunately, Ruairi and Bobby. So we're gonna take about an hour of your time every other week. But introducing our new pre-ECNL commissioners, Ruairi McGuinness and Bobby Reiss. So what I'll do is I'll turn it over to you guys one at a time. We'll start out on the West Coast with a guy with the most immaculately manicured beard that you will ever see, Bobby Reiss, out here in San Diego. Bobby, you want to give a little introduction of yourself, your background?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Excited, happy to obviously be here and get going. And it's been great working with obviously you and Ruairi, just in the, I think 2 days that I've been officially in the role. Yeah, a little bit about me. I've been at formerly San Diego Surf in a couple different capacities for the past probably 7 years. Started as a coach in what was, the NPL days that then transitioned into the RL, director, coach, helping with the ECNL, which then transitioned about 4 years ago into a general manager role at San Diego Surf, working closely with the director of coaching there, and was in that role. And then obviously, next iteration for me was taking on the role with your organization, the ECNL, specifically the pre-ECNL.
Our
A little bit about,
organization now. Our
sorry?
organization.
Oh,
Our
our,
organization.
not, yeah, you're right, not yours. And so, yeah, was always thought highly of the ECNL and working with them, obviously being in the league with the boys and the girls at San Diego Surf and working with your team in the way that they did things. And so when the opportunity presented itself, it was a no-brainer for me. And specific to this age group, I've been able to see kind of the different iterations of this in the Southern California scene, from no pre-ECNL to I think now in its fourth year, and kind of watching it professionalize and grow and gain momentum, which has been awesome. And I think what was exciting for me was the particular age group, right? I think that what comes to mind for me is if you go to any top elite youth event, whether that's a Surf Cup, a Dallas Cup, anything in between, and you go and watch a U11, U12, like semifinal, final, those are some of the most exciting games that you'll see. And so, working with that age group is obviously something that's going to be very exciting for me. So happy to be here.
Thank you, and we'll talk a little bit about the reason why we created these positions, what we're hoping to do, some other announcement breaking today on this stuff as well as we get into this. But I'll also turn it over to Ruairi McGuinness here. Ruairi's been in the league as well for a long time. Also did some work in the league as our girls national selection director, helping to identify players for the NSG games, in the ECNL and the regional league all over the country, and the Conference Cup. So Ruairi had his foot in the water in the ECNL, and now he's jumped fully in. Ruairi McGuinness.
How do I follow that perfect beard, by the way? My God.
I mean, you're very well shaved. Bobby is very well manicured.
I'm trying so hard. Bobby, I'll try to follow that as best I can. We've talked so many times. Yeah, Ruairi McGuinness from East Meadow, Long Island, New York, by way of Luton Town in London, England, by virtue of Northern Ireland. Yeah, just a fantastic opportunity right here. We are so welcoming to the opportunity to grow this space, to give more soccer, to extend the opportunity to our families and our membership in our member clubs in the pre-ECNL space, and give them their first opportunity, their first impression of what's going to be their journey moving forward.
All right, so I'll give a little set the stage here a little bit, and then we can just open up on some topics because you guys are going to be the boots on the ground and the arms and legs doing the lion's share of work in growing this platform. Um, both we announced you guys, I think, less than a month ago. We probably announced the creation of the pre-ECNL commissioners. It's sort of in some ways, it's a natural evolution to the league. I think if you go back 4 years, we may not have had any formal pre-ECNL competitions. If you go way back, like 10 years ago, we used to allow clubs in the league to designate pre-ECNL tournaments. I don't even know if Ruairi, you were around back in the day. But if they wanted to do something in 11, 12 age group in a tournament, we let them do that as long as it was only ECNL clubs playing. And that was because we had no involvement in these age groups at all. But just because it wasn't where the league started and where people wanted to put their focus as far as clubs go. But as we've grown and as the game has evolved, what became clear to us is that there's a real need and opportunity to improve what exists in the U12 and below age groups. You know, what I think the Federation will call Zone 1. And we decided that we are now at a point with the scale and scope that we can do things and put resources into this age group to help our clubs move the needle and help them move forward the training and competition space for these younger players, these 9v9s and 7v7s, and we can even talk about those playing formats to some degree if we want. So I guess I'll start with asking you guys what you want to accomplish in these roles, with the basic caveat first that what we're not trying to do in this space is treat these players like professional players or treat them like they're under 18 players or do anything that's not developmentally appropriate in terms of their age. What we are trying to do is improve the daily environment for those players. Our impact is obviously through competition and the link from competition into training, which is the job of the clubs. But why don't I throw this to you guys and say, what are you guys most excited about? How are you guys going to start in this position? Because Ruairi, you're less than 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks into this. Bobby, you're 2 days into this, so it's very blank canvas at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Bobby puts so very well eloquently all the time, but we are trying to make sure the standards are appropriate. The standards for game time, half lengths, the correct size of field, all those things that are appropriate to the developmental nature of moving forward. But we're also trying to make sure that there's a correct comparative standard, the ultimate, the absolute best, the best games you can possibly have in your weekend, with no need to go into an environment elsewhere locally to play other games. So that's what we're trying to achieve.
Bobby, what would you say?
Yeah, I'll piggyback there, Rory. I think maybe this spurs into some more conversation and context. We can debate some of this, but I think naturally when you look at the evolution of US soccer, right? The player, naturally, I think, and you guys both know this in running clubs, I think naturally you tend to jump into a club and you tend to focus on older age groups, right? Your top coaches are typically coaching maybe in your U19s, U17s, your more elite level coaches. And I think as I've seen, my experience would tell me that it's not that you can't have your elite level coaches in those age groups, but I think you find some of the clubs that are doing it best are putting more of an emphasis on their foundational players, like your zone one. Maybe that means your top coaches are there. Maybe that means it's the way that you set up your club in terms of directors or that sort of thing. But I think the pre-ECNL for me is kind of the next iteration of development when it comes to, hey, we've obviously gotten good momentum in the U13 to U19, particularly obviously in the ECNL. And this is the next iteration of going, how do we make sure that we're also providing the right environment and pathway platform, as Rory mentioned, all the different parameters that help kids develop. I think it shows that we can, okay, we've done a decent job. We're not perfect by any means, but now we can start to take it a step back, if you will. When I say back, I mean younger, and start to develop those kids and put those kids in environments a little bit earlier than we typically have.
Bobby, I think you're speaking to the choir a little bit because I believe Christian is working with U8 boys in San Diego.
Well,
So
I am
true.
U8 or U9. I'm not sure what the age group is because it's all messed up by calendar year. Um, But it does, and we've talked about this before, when you're in and around those families and kids, it does give you a different perspective of it. And so I think if you look at sort of the reshape or revamp of the American youth soccer landscape over the last 15 years, it started at the older age groups, and and really it was U16 and U18 when the DA boys was first targeted. Then it shifted down to 14, then filled in the gaps. Obviously, ECNL comes in. And then there's been a great consolidation of talent across those leagues and those clubs, and the regional league expanding into that. And, so that's where a lot of the change has occurred. Now, as that is solidifying and consolidating, it really, from our perspective, we look down at U12 and below. And the reality, to your point, Bobby, is most people get super excited about the older age groups. It is a completely different skill, I would say, to coach a U18 team than to coach a U8 team. And I
Mhm.
remember Ian Barker, who was my college coach back in the day and director of United Soccer Coaches Education for a while. He used to make the point that if we really want to talk about development, we should put the best coaches with the youngest ages. And I guess I'll ask you guys to respond to this because I think there's a lot of people who would agree with the fact that if kids don't have a really good base of skill and ideas by the time they reach under 13, the ability to change and improve after that is significantly different than it is to change before that.
Yeah, I would agree, Christian, and I think that again, not a massive sample size when it comes to the nation, but obviously being in the West and seeing some of these top clubs that are competing in the league and where they're placing some of their emphasis. I think if you talk to a lot of directors, they would tell you that at some point in time they decided to take a step back and look at who they were placing in the youngers and how they were developing those kids. And really, when you look at that setup, I mean, it makes complete sense. I think the fear of that maybe with certain clubs or individuals is, coming in and, okay, I want to win and I want to win now. I don't want to develop kids at 11 and 12 to then win in 3 or 4 years. But the way that I would look at that would be, what's really your foundation for what you're building going forward, right? And so all that loops back into what I think the pre-ECNL can help provide. I won't dive too much into this, but I think devil's advocate might tell you, well, okay, really, we're gonna do pre-ECNL at these age groups. Is that necessary? Let these kids play local, let them play with their friends. And I think that's an important thing to take into consideration. But the other piece of that is I think that societally, as it comes to soccer in America, I don't think a lot of our kids are just playing in the streets, small-sided pickup. Rory, I'd love to get your opinion on kind of what, maybe your upbringing was like in that regard. But I think what a league does is it establishes the structure and environment for those kids to then go play and do that. And without the league and without the right, system in place or guardrails, if you will, I don't think that we can get those kids in that environment to help them develop because I don't know that they're doing it outside of the league, is I guess where I sit.
Well, and I would add to that, and Roy, you can jump in, is that the format and the way we envision this is going to vary location by location, based on what the clubs want, what the realities of geography are. Again, we're not looking at having kids go in these major road trips. That's not the intent at all. In some places, our pre-ECNL leagues are supplemental, which is they're going to add 10, 15 games a year that, to Rory, your point earlier, are the absolute best games that those kids are going to play in terms of competitive level and challenge. And then they're going to play in local leagues for a lot of other games where the level of competition is lower. And those different types of resistance are important. And right now, in areas where we do that, the reality is those kids may not be getting enough resistance in the games that they get just within their local league, so they need that. In other areas, going back to the fact that so much attention and resources has been placed on the older age groups for so long, as simple as it sounds, having a coherent schedule structure, having the right size fields and the right size goals, having lines on the fields, having referees show up on time, having groups of players and teams that are actually playing to try and play soccer, not just run around and kick people. Those things are still need significant improvement, and I would call the average U11 environment. And by having some specific people like you and the rest of our staff that will support you in putting those standards in and making sure they're enforced, we really hope to provide a much better competition experience for whatever number of games these kids are going to play within the pre-ECNL, and in addition to whatever else they're playing. Rory, you got any thoughts on that?
I think we're talking a lot about game models, club synergy models, developmental processes versus winning, which is another segue for what we need to talk about today, for sure. Going back to what you asked, Bobby, I think the stat is 80% differential between free play for a European kid and a US kid.
Mm.
I think that's the stat.
So you're saying a European kid plays 80% more of their
Even
time
in this current
for free?
climate. Even this current climate.
Really?
Yeah. That's
Oh.
the current trend. So when you love the game that much, you want the game that much, you live the game that much, you want to win the game that much, which I think there's a shift between what we should be trying to do here a little bit in our current climate in the pre-ECNL platform, which is basically saying, development is also winning. Development is also teaching your kids to win. What does that mean? Scoring goals, celebrating goals, winning the game. I think we've lost touch with that reality.
Well, and Rory, I'm going to use that as a perfect segue because this podcast releasing on Wednesday, August 20th, and today we also are announcing the creation of the first ever pre-ECNL Cups, which are events, tournaments that are going to be U12 and younger, that the ECNL will run, where players and teams will show up and they will play for a trophy and a tournament championship over the course of that 2 or 3 day event. And we're really excited about this. I think we're announcing 5 total, maybe 6 actually, if you count the North Carolina event, which goes older age groups as well. But we're excited about this because, to your point, Rory, if you work with young kids, and a lot of people with opinions about about what goes on at U11, U12, or U10, they actually don't spend any time down there, whether they're academic or whether they're just coaching in older age groups. But if you're working with those kids, and Bobby, you said it, and I always used to, say something similar watching like an indoor tournament in Wisconsin. If you watch the U10s, U11s, every goal is the goal of a lifetime. Every game is the World Cup final. And I say that in a positive way because of the emotion, the excitement, the thrill. What those players want to do is play for winning. And I think we're going to embrace that with the pre-ECNL Cups, not because winning is the only thing that matters, not because winning is more important than development, but because it is, to your point, Rory, I think we all believe the country here has gone way too far in separating competitive performance and instinct and winning from development. And I actually believe that the coaches and clubs in our league are thoroughly informed and aware of how to develop players and teach them for long-term success while also embracing the fun and excitement of winning in the short term. What do you guys say about that?
I can
Sorry,
go ahead, Roy.
I think I'd take my nephew's team from Enniskillen town and walk in here and just be totally different in terms of their competitive value and their want to win. It's from Northern Ireland. It's far different than what we're teaching right now. They're a different breed. They want to win. That's what they want to do. They want the medal. But our choice and our want, and Bobby agrees, we spoke eloquently about this, is our want to make sure the developmental process is still intact. But it should not be the overriding effect.
Absolutely, Roy. I think what comes to mind for me is maybe if I dumb this down a little bit, I think winning, the conversation around winning, it allows you to, there's also learning in that in terms of where you are versus your peers, where you are in life. I think if you take soccer out of it, right, and that you just talk about the natural development of an individual or an adolescent at that age, um, I think the idea of having parameters or a gauge of where you are, again, versus your peers or within a team or in society, I think there's learning that comes with that that's important. By no means am I, professional in that world, but when I think about that's what comes to mind. I think the age range, those adolescents at that time are looking for feedback from coaches, peers, games, trainings, etc., to get a better understanding of who they are, what works, what doesn't work. And that's where I go. I think to your point, Christian, I think we get really caught up in just this idea of winning. And don't get me wrong, there's individuals that out there, and we've all seen them, that coach just to win, and it's this crazy chaos, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But back to your point, the majority of the professionals in this league that are doing this the right way, I really think would echo that same sentiment of what winning provides for the players in the
But
team.
it's not indifferent though, Bobby, right? So if you think about what's happening in the rest of the world and top academies throughout the country, our country, top academies throughout Europe, we're talking about, real top academies like Barcelona,
Mhm.
Espanyol, Chelsea. It's a different environment. It is
Mhm.
be the be all end, like be the most entirely top competitor. And I don't think we have a concept of that here because we're so in depth on allowing players to develop. But
Mhm.
I mean, there is some great stories of kids playing in Chelsea Academy, getting signed for different money at U10, U11, U12. I mean, we have to acknowledge the fact that teaching development is one thing, teaching winning is another thing. You have to understand that teaching winning and being competitive is a fantastic story. And we have to,
Well, and by the way, that fantastic story and the excitement that surround it is what keep kids involved in sport because they like it and it's fun. And it's what makes, I look at, if we want to grow culture in this soccer culture in this country, you want more families excited about soccer. You want more families having a great weekend watching their son or daughter playing, their son or daughter having a great experience. And to your point on that, Rory, the odds of anyone being signed at a young age and being a pro is like 0.001%,
right.
which is another reason why make it fun. Make it fun for them to compete for trophies and within the right environment. And that'll be something that we have to balance and make sure it doesn't go over the top. But we were talking prior to going live on here, the La Liga Futures tournament is one of the highest profile, biggest promoted U12 seven-a-side tournaments in the world. And it's a fantastic showcase of talent and potential and excitement with some of the biggest names in the world. It's not that by saying winning is fun and important and a part of development, that's not a foreign concept in the rest of the world. I think it's become more of a foreign concept in America as, for some reason or another, there are people that continue to push it farther and farther down the priority list. And again, we've said this, and I want to make sure we're not misquoted or don't have people throwing things at us. Development is the most important thing in these age groups. What we are saying is don't make development so stale and so boring and so devoid of actual, to your point, Bobby, comparison of, hey, how am I doing compared to these other players? That we harm the instinct to win. We make soccer less exciting, and we look back in years. And I think there's a part of that happening right now where we look back in years and say, man, uh, this has gone too far. All right. And I think we need to let people be excited to compete to win. And we need to celebrate some of that drive and some of that fight that, just put it within the right context and don't overemphasize it above some of the things that you may compare it to.
And now a quick word from our sponsors. The ECNL is pleased to have Quick Goal as the official goal provider and partner for ECNL girls and boys, a partnership created to support the growth and development of the country's top players, clubs, and coaches. At all national events, including national playoffs and national finals, the Quick Goal Coaches Corner will provide hospitality and social space for ECNL girls, ECNL boys, and collegiate coaches. Quick Goal will also be the presenting sponsor of the national championship winning ECNL Girls and ECNL Boys Coaches of the Year and the ECNL Girls and ECNL Boys Goals of the Year. Quick Goal looks forward to helping the ECNL continue to elevate the standards of youth soccer and provide more opportunities to players on and off the field in the coming years. And Continental Tire. Drive into summer with Continental Tire. Whether you're planning a road trip or heading to a soccer match, purchase a set of 4 qualifying Continental tires now through August 31st and get a $110 Continental Tire prepaid MasterCard by mail. Visit ContinentalTire.com to learn more. Continental Tire, the smart choice in tires.
Bobby?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Rory, I'd love your opinion on this because you mentioned it and you gave a great, stat there of the 80% to the 20%. And this is a big conversation that a lot of people are having, obviously, in the youth and in the professional American soccer landscape. But I guess, because there's so much pushback, Rory, I would ask you, because you've obviously been in these different societies in integral parts of your life. Is the American society able to adapt that to where we can see? I think it's a long-term process, right? But where you could see growth in that in 10 to 15 years. And it's a loaded question, but I go back, Christian, to what you alluded to was I was young enough to play in the development academy my senior year of high school, and the next iteration of that became, to my understanding, a heavy focus on style of play versus maybe results winning.
Yeah.
Rory, I guess I'd pose the question to you on just in your experience, how you've seen what you've seen and how you've seen maybe our culture and society be able to adapt or develop something like that in the right way.
No, it's a great question, Bobby. I actually don't think we can be an organization where we are telling people what their game model should be, what their philosophical premise should be, or what their game synergy model should be. We have to be an organization that says, these are the parameters, these are what we want. We want the best competitive value for every game we possibly have. I think that developmental purposes are integral to every club, and we have to be savvy to that, whatever their philosophical approaches are, or whatever their game model is. It might be, okay, play this system versus this system.
It might be being more direct than less direct, and that's okay because that's what makes the game fun. And I would argue on that point because it's easy for somebody, I'm gonna use the boogeyman here as like some purist to say that, oh, you can't be too direct, and I think again that is largely over exaggerated because what would be one natural instinct you'd love to stimulate in a young player? Bravery and confidence to go at people, to try one-on-ones, bravery and courage to press and to tackle. I mean, those are things that are associated with being a little bit more direct. And I think it is hard, especially with younger players.
Or more competitive.
More competitive, yeah. And I think
Hmm.
it's hard with a young player, especially to separate it to say, listen, I want you to go be really, really aggressive and press and be combative and get the ball back. And then, by the way, once you get it, I want you to flip the switch and be calm, pass the ball 15 times, and solve every overload. That's a hard emotional switch for a player to do. I would say it's unrealistic for it to happen as a switch. It's a good discussion to have, but in a world, I would suggest that it's good to have some people that are encouraging really aggressive, direct play with the ball and without the ball, and some people that are saying, "Hey, I don't want you to press as much. I want you to be calmer and organized, but then when we get the ball, we're going to play a different way." That collision of philosophies and of different types of opinions is ultimately going to create a more vibrant and successful soccer system than if everybody is told to do one thing, pick one of them or anything in between.
Hmm.
But again, Bobby, to answer the question and tap on what Christian said, we are not dictating that.
No, we're embracing, but all of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also think, right now, and what, 4 or 5 years ago, U.S. Soccer did these PDIs, player development initiatives, one of which was to lock in 9v9 at U11 and 12 and 7v7 at U9 and U10. And so since
You're
these are the
smiling at
age
me, by the
groups,
way. You're smiling at me. I know where you're going with this.
um, well, in general, smaller sided is good. I mean, when I grew up, I think we said this on the other podcast because I'm older than you guys. But I don't think you played 11 aside at U10 on a full side field.
I
But
did.
I did when I was a U10 or U11, because that's just the way the sport was, and it goes back to culture has evolved and people understand more about youth development, how that's not really functional for 10-year-olds to have to climb Mount Everest to get to the goal. But when U.S. Soccer did that and said, okay, 7 aside and 9 aside is what we're going to lock in here, there's a lot of people who think that that's consistent with the way it's done all over the world, and it is not. It is very different across the world. There are some places like Spain who are still playing 7 aside at U11 and U12. There are places that play 8 aside. I think England just announced going into this coming season that England's not even going to play 11 aside until the under 15 age group. Am I right on that, Rory? I'm going to try and pull up the chart.
No, you're correct. And
Uh,
for many aspects.
yeah, so here we go. At under 7 and 8, they're going to play 4v4. 9 and 10 is 5v5. 11 and 12, 7v7. 13 and 14, 9v9. And I'm going to argue, and I'd love your thoughts on this. Standings, scores, and trophies, so anything that's a metric of winning, has been put into this boogeyman of, oh, they're all the problem with youth development. It's standings and scores and winning that has created this problem of teaching skill and decision making and long-term development over that. And I would argue, especially having spent many of the last 6 months of weekends on the sideline at U12, U11, U10, U9, that if we want to improve development in those areas, the first thing we should do is play less than the numbers that are on the field. Because if you're doing U9 and 7v7, there is just a reality that is going to demand certain things from coaches to get the game to look at all like the game, and it's going to demand certain coaching points that would not be required if that game was a 5v5 game or a 4v4 game. And that if people want to get very serious about how do you create the best environment for 12 and under, I guess my premise is we should embrace the excitement of winning and competing and everything we've talked about. And we should talk about other factors that may improve and change what's happening on those fields that are not tied to winning. What do you say to that?
Well, I pivot to Bobby right now because Bobby, you spent 2 weeks in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
and you can probably speak on this a little bit better than most of us because that's the country that is producing more players, fact, for the Premier League, La Liga, and Champions League.
Yeah, it's a good question. And Christian, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, um, you mentioned obviously what the English and the FA are doing in terms of, smaller sizes, and I think that is probably pushing towards just kids and individuals getting more touches on the ball, I would assume, right? More
Yep,
opportunity to be
yep,
involved in the game. And you
yep.
think, I mean, you guys have seen it, right? And your first year of 11v11 with the kids, it's like they're using about a third, maybe a quarter of the field because it's just such a change for them. I think 2 points. The first point for me is finding the balance between, you want the practice and training environment to model the game because at the end of the day, when you get to 11v11 and you get to high school and college and professional, the game is the game and it's pretty much the same all across the board. And I think you need to be careful about um, deliberately kind of manufacturing what you want to see in the younger age groups to maybe get certain things that maybe aren't realistic to the real game. Maybe they are realistic to the real game, and you can find balance there. Um, And the second
Well,
piece that
to
I would
that
say there
point,
is that,
Bobby, to
yeah,
that point,
yeah.
if I hear you correctly, you're saying, hey, maybe waiting till U15 to play 11 aside might be a little late, is what I'm hearing you say there.
I think yeah, I go back to what I would call manufacturing like the results that you want to see. I think you naturally, we talked about it already on this call, is that our society, the kids aren't just playing outside of their training environment. So naturally, I could see how somebody would go, oh, well, this makes a lot more sense to at 12 and 13 get less players on the field, maybe a smaller field. But I think what we're doing there is uh, we're trying to make up for something that we lost when they were 7 and 8 years old, if that makes sense, right? By doing it later in life. And I don't know that that necessarily fixes the developmental
Well,
piece of that as it
yeah,
goes to
let
the
me
future.
react to that because I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting point because I also think we have to look at this and recognize that not all 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 year olds, whatever it is, are created the same. And
Mm,
there are players in each of those ages that are far more advanced technically, mentally, emotionally than others.
Emotionally, yeah.
hmm
And so you could
Yeah.
argue that there is a group of players that is ready for a 7v7 or a 9v9 a year or maybe even two sometimes years before a player that is a little later to develop physically, technically, emotionally, mentally, whatever it may be, that there is
hmm
not a clean, bright brush on that. And all you need to do to see that is go walk down to a field at a big event and see just the different levels of play within the same age
hmm
group. And so,
hmm
to your point, maybe it is there's a reality of, hey, if you don't get it at a certain age, it's hard to make it up later. Okay, that's part of
hmm
your point. The other piece to that is this is not so simple as any one size fits all. And I would make an argument that a good experience at U9, U10, U11, U12 may include a little bit of all of it.
mm
Playing some 77, playing some 11 aside, playing some four aside, playing some futsal, playing some, indoor, playing with walls, playing with, those things may actually be way more important in terms of the stimulating environment and learning opportunity than arguing about, well, this one had a trophy and this one didn't.
Yeah, for sure. And what came to mind, I mean, Christian, I'll use you as an example, and you probably feel this as a coach, right? You're currently, depending on the environment that you're in, two training sessions a week. You probably have different kids and different individuals in your team where you're going, man, it'd be great if I could spend 6 months on just getting them comfortable on the ball. And then you're showing up on the weekend and you're having to compete and you're having to talk about positional play and how to play. And Rory, to your point, game model, etc. It's an extremely tough balance. And I think you're right. I think the hope with that is the coach would be savvy enough to step back and understand that. Look to get them in the different environments like you're talking about to make them as well-rounded as possible.
I mean, I was just looking at I don't forget what age group I was watching this week, and under sevens or under eights, and they were playing seven aside. And there were some pretty talented players on the field. Again, I'd say this all, they're seven. Okay. Nobody's going to say they're going to be pros. Anyone who thinks your 7-year-old is going to be a pro, you need to take a step back. 'Cause they're not. Um, Somebody's mad. There's going to be a comment somewhere on Instagram on that. But I was looking at the game, and again, this is with some of the better 7-year-olds I would say that you'll find in Southern California. Was watching some of these players, and I was saying, you know what, this game, it was seven aside on whatever the dimensions are of the field, and I said it would be a far better experience, I thought, if the field was divided in half and they played 4v4 on
Agreed.
each half.
Agreed.
I
Mm,
thought the kids would get more touches on the ball, more decisions. They'd get more opportunities to score. The coaching points would be very different when you're dealing with those numbers than they are with seven aside. To your point, Bobby, I can see the value of putting them in seven aside periodically, and give them that picture of a bigger space and bigger numbers and bigger positional awareness. But I couldn't help but saying, you know what, this would be such a different environment if it was 4v4 with two subs on each field
mm,
than 7v7 with four subs. And I don't know, it's just these are things that I think will be that, and the reason we're talking about them is that when you're not in zone one, you can talk, this is just, imagination land. But as we start to build events and build leagues and build programming in zone one, these types of discussions become relevant. And I think what we will do is we will be trying different things, whether it's through league dates or league structures or tournament or event dates. We will try these things, and maybe nothing that we've said today, maybe something totally different. But that's the exciting part about you guys in these positions, is that we can actually start talking about making some changes and trying some new ideas and doing some things differently in the U12 and down age groups that, quite honestly, there's not been much done differently for a long time in those ages.
No, and I would also point and pivot to talking to the people who are not on this call, the club directors who are not on this call, who don't listen to this call, to get involved with all of their points of contact in zone one and be totally apparent to what's going on in those spaces and how they can better the development of those players. And that means winning too, right?
Well, and to your point, and Bobby, you mentioned this. We can sit here and again, we'll be cognizant of this. We never want to become the ivory tower, right? We lob a lot of accusations at ivory towers, okay, and which is why it's really important that the decision making and leaders in our organization are people that have been on the field for a long time. Many of them are still on the field in one form or another because you really understand it, right? When you're there every day, and you have to live with the consequences of the decisions that you make. And so it's easy for us to say, well, this is what we think should happen at U12, U11, or U10, or say, hey, clubs should put more resources into U10, U11, U12. And I think, Bobby, you're right. The more forward-minded clubs in the last 10 years have done that, and they've been rewarded for it because they have better players coming into 13, 14, 15, and all that sort of stuff. But now we are saying, no, we're actually going to put resources into this. We're going to put people into it because that's the first step of building that community and building that community with those people in each club. And I think you guys, because you both have coached in and run ECNL and RL programs and clubs, all the ECNL coaches know each other. The regional league coaches know each other. But the guys that are probably most disconnected, that are full-time guys in clubs, are the pre-ECNL guys. They don't all know each other. Certainly, they may know each other within a city or a little beyond a city, but there is no network of mentoring, of peer-to-peer information sharing, of let's come together and do everything we've done at 13 and 18. That doesn't exist right now in the pre-ECNL, and I think that's one of the really exciting things as you guys build these leagues and these events and these things, is to start to identify, empower, and engage those people all over the country, because there's some really, really talented coaches working in these ages in these clubs that most people don't know.
No, that's something we're very passionate about, Bobby. Yeah, agree.
Yeah, I think, yeah, go
we're
ahead.
very passionate about getting connected with the zone one directors, the people who understand what's going on, people who understand what's necessary for their environment, regardless of game model, developmental process, and what's needed, right? And we haven't talked about this in this call, but the demands for more and more soccer and a great first impression in the ECNL is huge, huge. So Bobby and I are ready to tackle that, definitely.
Bobby, expand on that. What are you seeing or hearing in these ages in terms of the desire for more?
Well, it's interesting that in my, again, little time in jumping into this, but just some calls and conversations I've already had with, the Northwest locally, and for me in Southern California, and then, Texas, and even into, New Mexico, Colorado. I don't shy away and say that it's a bad thing to hear that in these age groups. I think everybody views it a little bit differently, right? Some of them are playing in pre-ECNL environments already, but even that can look a little bit different. Some of them are going, hey, we're 9v9 in the fall, we're 11v11 in the spring. We're just doing our U12 team. We don't have it on the girls, but we have it on the boys for these reasons. And I think Rory and I agree on this, is that the beautiful thing that I think we're trying to do here is we're not coming in and going, hey, we have, like you mentioned, Christian, we're this ivory tower and we know what we're doing. It's, hey, how can we come alongside you and partner and help provide resources, structure, maybe things that you don't already have to better improve your environment for these individuals. And so as our conversation is floated around what's best from 5v5 to 11v11, I think it's the same conversations that are happening kind of across the country. A Southern California environment's going to tell you one thing that is working right now for their developmental needs, and then I think a Texas might tell you something different, similar. And I think that's the beautiful part about this conversation, the exciting part, but also the tricky part, right? About what can we bring to better each of those environments and create, I think, a little bit more uniformity, not not laying the law down and this is what we do, but I think there's a really fine balance in there that Rory and I will hopefully find with each of these clubs and conferences for the league to ultimately do what's best for the individual
And that's our
and
hope.
the
Our,
clubs.
our hope is to find a good balance in each geographical area, right? So what fits for the New England area may not fit for the Texas area, or may not fit for SoCal. So we are trying to make sure that we find the right balance and the right conformity to what the pre-ECNL should look like for your area. Definitely.
So to wrap this all up, the exciting piece is in many ways, this is a blank canvas for us to write on in terms of what we want to do and how we want to do it and how we want to structure it. It'll be heavily, heavily driven by, as everything is that we do, the feedback, desires, and perspective of the guys on the ground who are doing it. And in this case, it'll be specifically the pre-ECNL directors, because I would think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you go to any big club in the country and say, hey, I want to talk about your U10 program or your U11 program, the ECNL director or the DOC is going to say, okay, great, but talk to that guy,
Yeah.
right? Don't talk to him, talk to that guy, because that's the person who's doing it, and that program is very, very different. So we're going to empower those people. We're going to engage those people. We're going to create a wide variety of different structures based on what is appropriate geographically, competitive level, the existing ecosystem, right? Where I hate to use if it's not broke, then don't break it. But there are places where we will probably be supplemental. There are places where clubs will go all in across multiple age groups. We'll try some new programs and some new events. I mean, these pre-ECNL Cups, you guys will be at those, a bunch of those. I think the first one we're doing is Ohio, I believe. Ohio in September. The first weekend tournament championship for a U11 team to play in the ECNL. That should be a super exciting thing. And what we've talked about internally on that is making these events a celebration of soccer for the family, to make it a welcoming place for mom, dad, and the siblings, an exciting place for the player. Rory, to your point, a fantastic introduction to how cool and fun and exciting soccer can be long term, so that you keep those players and families engaged in playing and actively contributing to the growth of the sport. All that's on the table. You guys are in your first days and weeks of this. It's not going to be done overnight. But as we talk about internally, we run fast. And one of the best parts of our organizations is the ability to pivot quick and implement and execute quick. And I think we'll see that in what you guys are doing. And so I guess I'll turn it to each of you for last words. Last words as we wind down the podcast on the pre-ECNL and the future in those ages. Bobby, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think I would end with just what you said. Obviously, excited to get going and move energetically through this. I think, and I think the point that I want to get across and echo is exactly what you said. Is that I feel that the ECNL, in my experience, the ECNL has always been a league, obviously, that puts its members and its clubs first and partners with them to determine what the best plan of action is. And it's obviously no different as it pertains to the pre-ECNL. I think it's a space that we want to learn in all the different areas. It's a space that we feel it's necessary to start to dive into to continue the development of the player in the league, and ultimately want to partner with these individuals in all the different conferences nationwide to understand their needs, their wants, their desires in these age groups, and see what's best for each of these players and clubs and conferences.
Rory?
I zoned out. He's so good.
Nothing to add that. You're gonna just leave Bobby with the last word because you're gonna regret that down the road.
No, I'm gonna make it so simple. Teach your kids to pass, dribble, receive, shoot, score, celebrate, enjoy the game. Teach your kids to enjoy the game. Teach your kids to want to be a winner and be competitive. And we will get to a great place.
Yeah, I mean, is there any age that is too young to encourage competitiveness, to encourage striving and aspiration, to encourage display of skill, to encourage that when you do some things, there's positive outcomes, and when you do other things, there's less positive outcomes? I don't think there's an age that's too young to do that.
I don't.
That's what we want to do here. We're excited about it. I don't know that there's anytime recently anyway, somebody has gone into this space with as much vigor. I think that we're going to go into it. So we're excited about the growth of it. Excited to have you guys on board with us and what I think will be one of, if not the fastest growing areas of our league moving forward. The pre-ECNL Zone 1, boys and girls, leagues, events, services. Who knows what other types of programs we'll come up with to support the environment and support the clubs that are doing such great work down in those age groups. So thank you guys for being on. I hope you're going to click the subscribe button and make the Breaking the Line a part of your regular listening experience, because it'll inform, engage, and educate you.
I just want to
Duly noted.
I just want to hear you talk, not Doug Bracken. I'm just saying.
Well, Doug will be back on the next one, well refreshed and tanned, I think. So thanks to everybody. No Bracken's Brainbuster on this week. So you guys get away with that because he's not on today. But we may have to bring you back just to do that. I'm sure that was very, very high on your list of things for the day. Thank you, everybody.